Awesome. Tonight's speaker, we actually have Arnie here. He is going to, he actually came highly recommended from one of our brokers down in Pierce County when we had to deal with low appraisals. And she took a class and she's like, you've got to look at Arnie's material. And I know we haven't done a training like this in a while, and I could come up with the same slides that Arnie created, but he's got a little bit more fun to it. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Arnie. He's going to give you a little brief intro about who he is and where he works and kind of what he's got prepared tonight. It is a 30-minute presentation, so we'll keep it moving pretty quick. If you have questions, you can use the chat. We certainly will be watching the chat closely, but I think he's got some really good tips on how to handle low appraisals. So that might be on the horizon for a lot of you. So luckily for us, Arnie, we're not having too much, but I think because we get ahead of it, we do a lot of training in regards to how to work with lenders. And obviously we've encountered some things, but I'm sure that we'll get a few tips and tricks from you tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Arnie. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Rochelle, and thank you guys for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I'm Arnie Saltvick. I work for a mortgage company in Tacoma, Washington called Primary Residential Mortgage. And I've been with this company for 11 years. This is my 32nd year in mortgage lending. So I guess I call them brown hair days when I got into business. I've been around and I've done a whole bunch of loans over the years. Most recently in 2021, I was in the top 1% of originators in the nation. So, you know, for whatever that's worth, it's a nice ego booster for me that who cares, right? So I guess in doing these deals and managing offices and lots of volume, I've seen a lot of appraisals. So I know how to rebut an appraisal when it's low, and to get an appraisal raised when it comes in low is difficult, but it can be done. And there's some things that you want to look for in the appraisal. So I wanted to share some of those things that you can look for. First, how to read it and a little bit, and then what to look for to know if you've got an appraisal, a good or bad one that you can rebut. Okay. What you have to understand is just like, you know, the underwriters on loans right now, we use automated underwriting, the AUS, everybody knows, like Fannie Mae DU and Freddie Mac's LP. The appraisers use, the underwriters use automated system for the appraisal. They call collateral underwriter is the use system. For whatever reason, I'm amiss at what the LP system, but they have their own appraisal system that they run the appraisal through, and it gets a risk score of 1 to 5, 5 being highest risk, 1 being the least amount of risk. And with the appraiser, the underwriter gets a ton of data. They get to know like how many times that appraiser's used the comp before on other appraisals, how they adjusted it on other appraisals compared to this appraisal. They get all kinds of things, all the comps that have sold, and why didn't the appraiser use this comp versus that comp? Those would be questions we would ask in the past that we kind of don't even need to ask now because it comes up on the appraisals now. But if you wanted to see the CU stuff, I didn't come prepared to show you any of that stuff today, but just to look at the appraisal report and to see if it's worth rebutting. Would that be okay?
Sounds good.
All right, let's go. So what we're going to cover is, what I'd like to cover is, what do you do when you have a low appraisal? Why do you have a low appraisal? How the appraiser determines a range of value, a few ways to tell if you have good or bad comps, how to know if your appraisal may be defective, and why do some appraisals come in as is value, but then they have work orders when it comes to your underwriting. Has anybody ever seen that before? I see it from time to time. So go ahead to the next. Okay, so range of value. So is anybody old enough to remember this game? This was on The Price is Right. You had the appraiser, and this is how an appraisal is done. They pick a range with the comps. That's why they have comps. You have an upper end value range, a lower end value range, and then they determine where in the value range your appraisal is going to fit. So if your appraisal is below value, all it means is there's the upper end value range comp isn't high enough. So if you want to rebut an appraisal and to bring your appraisal up, you can't quibble with value. Well, that sucks. My cost per square foot is right in line with what I thought it was going to be. Nobody cares. The appraisers don't, they put it on the report, but they don't look at cost per square foot at all. So if you want to get nowhere with an appraiser in rebutting the appraisal, argue cost per square. It doesn't matter. So what you need is, you need a comp that's similar to the subject that supports a higher upper end value range. Does that make sense? And then
So
the
you're going for like a higher end, not for like, don't
So
pick the one that's low.
why don't we go to the next slide?
You'll explain. Okay. Did I go too far? Are we
So-
good?
No, this is good. So
Okay.
what most of us in the industry look at an appraisal is, what is the value? And am I as is? And is the value high enough? And if it is, I go, yeah, I'm done. I got it. You know, my deal's going to close, right? That's pretty much the only thing people look at on an appraisal. Both loan officers and agents that look at the appraisal, they just look at, did it come in high enough and do I have work orders, right? And if I do, what are they? So let's go to the next one. So if you want a higher value, the upper end value range has to be higher, right? So let's go to the next one.
Okay.
So remember that story that you teach or tell your kids of three bears? That's how an appraisal works. You need to have a daddy bear and a baby bear and then a mommy bear. So a similar home to set the upper end value range, ones that's usually bigger, nicer, better quality. Most often it's the highest sell, but it doesn't always have to be the highest sell. It has to be the highest value in relationship to the subject after adjustment. So we'll show you what that means. And then the comp that's smaller in square footage, but similar to set the lower end of value, usually the lowest sale. So square footage, lower end value that's similar to the subject. And then you want to have one comp that's most like the subject to support where in the value range the appraisal ends up. So the value on an appraisal, you guys, is really, it's an appraiser's educated opinion of value. That's it. So they can use in different markets, they'll use, have you ever seen appraisers use listings or pending sales? Those aren't really comps, but they'll use it. And that's why we haven't seen so many, as much as values have gone up, we haven't seen so many low appraisals lately. It's because they use listings and pendings to set the value, range. Okay. And then they use a closed sale to fit the house in that value range. And that's how they've been able to make value, even though there's no closed sales to support the value. They'll use the listings to set the value range. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So then one comp, there may be additional comps because they have to bracket everything. So they have to have a bigger square footage in the subject. You can't have all the comps lower than the subject. You have to have one that's bigger in square footage that they adjust down. You have to have one that's smaller that they adjust up. And if they all have all smaller that they're all adjusting up, that's against their rules of USPAP, which is the appraiser guidelines. It's kind of like the board of realtors, you know, standard code of behavior for a real estate agent. And there's the standard boards that the mortgage lenders are under that they govern our behavior. Well, there's codes that the appraisers work by, and one is they bracket everything. So they can't go one direction. So they also have to bracket, they have to add comps if you have outbuildings, pools, big, like I've seen big riding arenas. You can see some crazy comps just to bracket to show how much the market values those types of things. We can go to the next one. So this is an actual appraisal, little snippet of some of the comps. At the very top, you see where it says 19 comparable sales in the subject neighborhood in the last 12 months, ranging from 290 to 419. That gives you an idea. Now there's some, yeah, right there. So in the appraisal, there's also things where they show the absorption rate. Like how do we determine what an increasing and decreasing market is in a stable market? It's they show, are the most recent sales going up or are they going down? What's the trend look like? From 0 to 3 months, 6 to 9 months, 9 to 12 months. And then what are the predominant values? So you might be looking at it going, wow, this market's crazy going up. But if the sales don't support it, you might see stable, even declining market, depending on the specific sales in that specific market area. But as you can see with these three homes, this is a Lakewood Tacoma area property. And you see the three sales, they say 399, 355, and 325. And you can see that on those, so that what would our range of value be? Would it be 299 to 419, or would it be 325 to 399? Well, let's find out. We can go to the next screen.
Yeah, this would be your daddy bear, right? This would be your mommy bear.
That might be, they may be exactly like that, but it may be a little different when you see the adjustments. So what you look at, see in the middle of the screen on each comp, see where it says the lot size of the subject's 10,500 square feet. And then in comp one, the lot size is 12,162. Well, that's good. And see in comp three, it's 8,460 feet. So they bracketed the lot size. And then you see where it shows the age, 66, 59, 58, 66. So they have it pretty well bracketed on age. And then condition, see that C3, C2, C4, C3? In there, if you go, well, what does C3 mean and what does C2 mean? Well, I know what it means because I've read so many of these appraisals. You guys in the appraisal, C1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all defined in the appraisal, but basically C1's new construction. C2 is remodeled to like new condition that's currently being occupied. C3 means that it's had some updating, but it's not in new condition, but it's been updated from the time it was built. C4 means that it's in average condition for a house of its age with minimal updating. So when you see C2, C3, C4, he's bracketing the condition with comp number 2. And then he's got it one that's a little better. The daddy bear is a little better at C2, like new condition, but occupied. And C3 is kind of you look at that one as kind of the mama bear, the one that's most like the subject. Now, when you look, it's all about in an appraisal, the appraiser will write up, either do a really great job with his write-up in the comps and give you tons of information, how he adjusted, how he made those adjustments, and then he may do a terrible job. Okay. Oops. Let's go. We got to go.
I'm not a very good Vanna today.
We're going the wrong way. Okay. one more forward.
Here we go.
Okay. So then here are the other comps they use. See how they use 2 pending sales and 24 days of market. And then you see in comp number 5, that's a closed sale. And you see on the sale date, it shows that it closed in 9 of 20 and it sold in 8 of 20. And see the little $7,000 there, because this appraisal was done in 2021. And so you see the $7,000 positive adjustment up higher there, right there. But that is a time adjustment. And those are tricky little devils. So when you have a market that's increasing a lot, and the appraiser uses an old sale, and you go, oh my God, that sale's so old and the market's up so high. The appraiser can use a sale a year or further back. If they use one that's over in this market, especially if he said in the last year there's 19 sales on the first page, remember? And now he's got a sale in there that's over a year old. Well, why did he use that sale? Well, he used it to bracket the square footage of the property, see 1661, and that brackets the square footage on the upper end. But he had to use a time adjustment because in 2021, remember how much homes were going up in value? So you couldn't use an old sale without doing that time adjustment. The thing with time adjustments, they don't like to do them because of the data, the way they have to prove what they use. And they just can't say, well, it's gone up 6%, it's a half, so I'll just give it a 0.5% a month. I mean, some of them try to do that, but there's all kinds of data that they have to provide to back up their time adjustments. So I catch them in time adjustments all the time. And I've seen them where, hey, they didn't do it on the one that closed in December of 20, but the one they closed in September of 20, see comp 6 is still listing. But if that was a closed sale, I'd go, where's the time adjustment there? Well, see in this one, you see how it's pending. It's not closed, so it's not a comp. So why did they use it? Look at the very bottom of the screen. You see the adjustments. So there's 2 things I want to show you. You see how in comp number 5, comp number, what is that for? I think it's the very first comp here, the 1661. See how they have the positive 7,000 adjustment, and then the condition C4 is a positive 6,000 adjustment, and then the square footage is a negative 7,320 adjustment. So then if you look down below, it shows the gross and net adjustment. See it down below where it says 1.6% and 5.8%. So you can take the net adjustments. The net is 13,000 minus $7,320 divided by the original sale price, and that's a 1.6 net adjustment. And then if you add all three of those numbers together without the positives or negatives, just add all three together, that gives you the gross adjustments of 5.8%. And so the indicated value of the subject on the net adjustments is 355,680. And on with the two pending sales, 388,230 and 394,620. So that's the actual range of value that the appraiser is going to go with. And he's going to tell you on the next slide. I just picked it out of the appraisal so I could show you, but he'll tell you the value range that he used. So in this case, comp 1, 2, and 3 weren't even in the value range. It was comp 4, 5, and 6, and he used the pending and the listing he used as comps to establish the range of values. So he says, hey, the value range is 355,680 to 394,620. And it's indicated by sales comparison analysis. So has anybody done a multi-unit property and tried to argue the gross rent multiplier, like my cap rate is the value, and that's what I'm going to argue with the appraiser on because he didn't make value? Well, that's not going to work because all appraisals that we do for Fannie Freddie, they're all they're all sale approach. And have you ever seen the cost approach where it indicates a higher value? Where they say, well, here's the cost to construct, and here's the cost of the land, and here's the cost of improvements, minus some depreciation, here's your value based on cost approach. Well, it doesn't matter because it's a sale approach appraisal. So they're putting it out there, the information's out there for like your edification. Okay. So don't argue cost approach and don't argue income approach on an appraisal for a residential property. That's 1 to 4 units. Okay. So then he says, this is all he says about the comps. He says comp number 1 through 4 are closed and felt to be the best and most recent comparables available. Comp 5 and 6 are pending sales and provided for the reader's convenience. But why did he really provide them? To determine the upper end value range. That's why he provided them, right? But he doesn't say that. And then he says they were all given consideration arriving at the indicated value of the market approach. The pending sales provided in the report were not weighted in the analysis due to the fact that they are not settled sales. So if you had a pending sale the day he went out and then it closed the next day, could he use it as a comp? The answer would be no, because it wasn't closed on the day he inspected the property. But so if we want,
we'd have to redo the appraisal, right?
If we wanted to redo an appraisal, if that would make the appraisal work, then that would be excellent. So let's go to the next.
I mean, it seems, Arnie, that the range is pretty wide too, isn't it? For most appraisals. I mean, that's pretty big.
So I've been to court a few times over my career with appraisers where people have sued the appraisers just to watch. And, I was on a witness list a couple times on a really ugly transaction. And the appraisers will tell you if they bring an appraisal in and they're plus or minus 10%, if the actual value is plus or minus 10%, that's the margin of error for an appraisal generally. So if you have a $500,000 appraisal, that means somewhere between 450 and 550. If they're within that range of actual, if they're somewhere in there, they did a fine job. You'll lose every time. So how do you know if you have a good or bad appraisal? Remember when we just talked about gross and net adjustments? As a rule, if your net adjustments are below 15% and your gross are below 30, that indicates an acceptable comp. It may not be an acceptable comp, but that indicates that it probably is. How about, and then what are the distance from the subject and the date of sale? Are they in the same market as defined by the appraisal? So one time we had an appraisal where the comp was in north end of Tacoma near Annie Wright. That's what the subject was. And the comps the appraiser were using were up by Westgate, like 26th and like 30th and off 30th and Pearl.
That's way off.
Right? It was pretty off, but it was within the mile-ish range.
Mhm.
But we were able to go to to real estate agents that knew the market, and they helped us with some data. And we got a VA appraisal up $60,000 by arguing that the appraiser accepted a order in a market that he didn't know the neighborhood well enough to use comps in the defined area. So always read the very first page of the appraiser. The appraiser defines the area of the property. And if they don't define it correctly, like I had an appraiser one time not define University Place correctly. And so he was using comps around 6th Avenue, which isn't University Place, right?
Mhm.
And so if he's using comps outside of the market, then it's not an acceptable appraisal. And so then you can't just, well, I don't agree with the value, let's just order another appraisal. You have to have it determined that it's defective before you can order a second appraisal. It doesn't matter if we want to do it and if everybody wants to pay for it. And it doesn't matter if it goes from one lender to another, because the SSL numbers, the Fannie Freddie, they track the numbers. So they know if there's another appraisal. So you have to have rock solid, why did you do a second appraisal? Just because you didn't agree, that's not enough, right? And so you look for the location of the comps in relationship to the subject on the map. Are there areas that look close by that just aren't in the same market, i.e. a sale on one side of I-5 when the subject's on the other? It may or it may not be a comp, on one side of 512 when the subject's on the other. That
Right.
may not be a comp. And you being the expert in the marketplace, the markets better than anyone, even the lenders by far. Good.
Yeah, I had that same thing happen recently, Arnie, with the Issaquah School District and Renton School District. It's
Yeah.
like, just the school district difference affects the value as well.
University Place in Tacoma, people want to have their kids there and they will pay more for a house there. So look at the gross and net adjustments and the sale dates and the distance from the subject. So let's go to the next screen really fast.
Okay.
And so if you look, here's where you see it. Right at the top, I highlighted proximity to the subject. So on these three comps, or this is comp 4, 5, and 6, it says they're 0.14 mile away northeast, 0.02, that's like next door, right? And 0.23, those are pretty close. And then you can see the recency, the sales, see where it says the data source and the days on market. It was 5 days, 4 days, 24 days on market. And then you can see the sale dates, the data sale, December 20. Well, those are two pendings. And the one closed was September, and then it had the time adjustment. And then you can see the net and gross adjustments below 1.6, 5.8, minus 2.9. That's pretty low. That's a negative net adjustment. That's pretty good. 5.9, 8.7, and 12.3. So those are pretty solid from the standpoint of adjustments. When you'll see them way out is like, let's say they have a riding arena in one of our massive outbuildings they're trying to bracket. You might see some crazy adjustments on square footage and other stuff. And then you look at the appraisers right up in the comps to say, well, why did he use this? If it's a 50% gross and a 40% net, it indicates it's not a comp unless in his write-up he says, well, I used it to bracket the riding arena. Okay, that makes sense. So to show the market how they look. So look at the pictures. Do the comps look like the subject at all? And if no, does the appraiser explain why? So did they use split levels to compare against Ramblers? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's look at what this appraiser or what this appraisal looked like. So this is the subject. And this date of the appraisal was January 28th of 2021. And it's a while ago, but it's good for, and it looks like, your standard 3-bedroom, 2-bath Rambler, right? So let's go to and then these are the comps, the first three. They look kind of the same to me. But if they were wildly different, then I might go, I'm going to dig into that and read the appraisal. Why did he use comp 3? Why did he use a split level? Why, if he says there's 19 comps in the last 12 months, why am I using a split level, right? So let's go to the next one. Then we look at the map. Are the comps in the same market area? So then this is where it's kind of a little light, but you can see the subject is at the bottom. And then you can see the little arrows going in. They're all there. One comp 2 looks like it's on the other side of I-5. It's not. It's just closer. It's in that the little arrow goes in. I apologize that it's a little light, but they're all really super close. All 6 comps are right there. Boom.
So we're not gonna be able to challenge them on the location or the type.
I don't think so, no.
Yeah.
This one looks pretty tight. So on appraisal, when you have a government loan, so that FHA and VA and USDA loans, if the homes don't meet the minimum property standards for FHA, the appraisal will make the property subject to every time. So he would say, hey, subject to water straps and a CO2 detector and smoke alarms and peeling paint on the side of the house. And I had one that I just did that was VA that had peeling paint on the side and some rot under the windowsill and the exterior. And he had a leaking tub. And, there's a handful of things that the seller and buyer had to figure out before we could move on after the 35R. But on a conventional loan, they've changed recently in the last year. They've changed how the appraiser calls out the work. So they will say it's in as is condition, but then they'll put in the appraisal all the things they recommend the underwriter call for. So remember at the very beginning, I showed you what do most of us care about the appraisal? Is it an as is condition? And did I make value? Woo-hoo! And then it comes out of underwriting and you have all these work orders and you're like, how did that happen? This is how. I'll show you. So conventional loans, read the appraiser's condition comments and look at all the pictures. Mainly, if you just look at all the pictures of the subject, he'll point out anything that he's going to recommend the underwriter call for. He'll point it out in the picture. So if you see hanging insulation under the house in the picture, the underwriter's probably going to call for it to be fixed. If you look under there and it's just like junk everywhere, you're going to have to clean it out. If you see a picture of the water heater and there's no straps on it, you're going to know, even though it's in as is, they're going to come back and ask for the strap. So I'll show you. There are 2 areas where you'll find the condition. So let's look. So here's the pictures of this house. So you can look down the side. Now you see where it says like side view 2. They have some like lights hanging from the side or whatever. This looks like a pretty nice house in decent condition. Now, if there was a problem, instead of side view 2, it would say peeling paint on side, and so that would be a clue that you're going to have to fix that peeling paint on the side. So on FHA, they're really big about scraping it all off and then painting it to match. And then I always tell people, make sure you're out there with your wet dry vac, sucking up the paint chips, because you can do a fine job on the paint. If you leave the paint chips, they won't pass it. So anyway, we can go to the next one really fast. And then there's like pictures of the inside. There's the water heater. You can see 2 straps on it. You can see the rest of the house looks fine. The exterior building, see the outbuilding out there, looks in really great condition. On a conventional loan, it's not a big deal if the building's fallen down, but on an FHA or VA loan, it is a big deal. And so then I've literally had people out there cutting those buildings down with a reciprocal saw and pulling them aside so that they're removing them from the property to get signed off on. They can take them off usually later, but if they're not going to put them into, at least like not falling down condition, then you're not going to get an FHA or a VA loan, even on an outbuilding like that, or garage or something. Let's go to the next one. So then here's this appraisal, the condition of the property. This is what the appraiser said. He said, the LVP flooring installed in 2020, at the time of inspection, all the utilities mechanical systems were on. Smoke alarms were observed, but CO2 alarm was not observed in the home. The water heater is double strapped, equipment with pressure relief. At the time of inspection, the garage is currently being used as living space. Per the owner, when she purchased the home, there was a temporary partition wall between the garage interior and exterior. The garage interior is concrete floor, no formal heat source. Due to the temporary nature of the garage use, the facts there is no heat in the area, this is still considered a garage and is valued as such. No needed repairs or inspections were observed. So is this one going to be done as is? Candace, what do you think? As is or subject to?
Candace, what do you think? As is?
He's on mute. You got to unmute.
There we go. I would say it'd be subject to
And it was subject to, and it was subject to the CO2.
CO2. Yeah,
detectors.
for
That's
sure.
it. Yeah. Now, if you have a converted garage, remember the picture on the outside, it looked like a garage door on the outside of the house and it's converted to living space on the inside. What do you think the chances are that this one was permitted? So if I went out to take a listing and I saw the garage door on the outside and I went inside and it's living space on the inside, and I wanted to list it via FHA, I would check, because unpermitted workspace, it's okay on conventional, as long as it's done in a workmanlike manner. But it's not okay on FHA and VA if it's unpermitted. You would actually have a negative cost to cure, and the appraiser would say, hey, it costs $8,000 to put the garage back to a garage, and that would lower the price by, $8,000. Now, in this case, that's how this deal was. It was started as FHA. Then we found out about the unpermitted workspace and the negative cost to cure. And it had also negative functionality, because using that as living space, there was no in and out access from that garage, which made it functionally obsolete. And the appraiser hammered this thing for like 20 grand. And in that market at that time, but we got the seller bought it in 1960 something, and they immediately converted that garage to living space. And they lived that way from 1960 something till 2021 when my client bought it. And we had to flip it. We got them to reduce the price $20,000. And then we flipped it over to conventional and closed it as is. So they got the deal of the century at $377,000. Because I think it was priced at like 390 something back then, and they got them to move, and I thought, God, good for them. So so if you have unpermitted workspace, it has to be conventional. Okay.
No, that's great, Arnie. That was super, super good to go through. Candace, did that answer a lot of questions that we had about, I know you've been getting a lot of agents asking questions about appraisals, and I think it's helpful to hear your perspective, Arnie.
Right. Well, and I think the biggest thing too is that we get I guess we kind of get caught up in these and really wanting to figure out a way around. And so I think for me, it was really clear as all get out that, square feet, when you're doing comparison based on square feet, as well as anything other than the sales approach, it's just kind of, that's not the route to go.
If you go back to those comps, if you go back up a couple, right, let's see.
This one or back?
Yeah. How about that one right there? Go down one. Okay, right there. You
Okay.
see in the middle, right under where I have it highlighted, where it says proximity to subject, you go down, it says, here's the cost per square. And on those three comps there, this is comp 4, 5, and 6. You can see 210.72 a square foot, 219.63 a square foot, and 342.36 a square foot. So do you see that massive difference in cost per square?
Yeah.
So if you go to argue that with the appraiser, plus it's not a sale approach, it's not a sale. So and a lot of times when we have a low appraisal, we don't have that many, but right now, but we have in other markets, gosh, it feels like in like 2013, 14, right in there, we were seeing them low all the time. I feel like I've got a post-secondary degree in appraisal rebuttal because I've done it so many times with all these things. And the first thing I start with is I go to the listing agent. I said, what comps did you use to do the listing? And most often they say, well, whatever the seller told me to list it for is what I listed it for. Or they say I took 219 a square foot times this many square feet and there's my value. And neither one of those things works at all. With a VA loan, they call Tidewater. Have anyone ever heard of Tidewater? So the appraiser will call out to the lender who's supposed to communicate it to both agents. And some lenders, I'm blown away by this, but some lenders don't communicate to both sides. So I had a buyer one time who the lender reached out, or no, my buyer was selling, and their buyer, the VA reached out to them and their agent to call Tidewater, and they never told the seller's side, because it was in the buyer's best interest to have the sale price lowered. So they didn't do a thing. They just dropped the bomb. And then the whole point of Tidewater is so that we can work together to find a way to get additional data to the appraiser so he can make the value if he can. And I'll tell you really too quick on that one is, one, I knew the appraiser a little bit over the years, and we had a VA deal. It was down in Olympia where the seller had agreed to put in new carpet, and there was some window issues, as I recall, and that they were going to fix. And I don't know that 35R made it to the appraiser. And so he was called Tidewater, and I called him and I'm like, hey, Jim, did you know this? And he got really mad when I called, because we're not supposed to talk to each other, right? So then I'm like, hey, I just want to make sure you have this information. Did you know there was this addendum where the sellers agreed to put in new carpet and repaint this one room and fix these 2 windows? And he's like, no, I did not know that. And that's what brought the appraisal in. He made it subject to those things. We did a little escrow holdback, and boom, we were done. And had we not had that communication, that deal would have come in low and we would have had a big mess. Because once they turn in the appraisal, it's like moving, you can't get them to move. It's not gonna happen.
I think when you ask an appraiser too, Arnie, what is it that drives them crazy or drives about real estate agents? Number one is real estate agents don't find the right comps. That's one of the things that drives them crazy. The second thing is that they hate it that they don't have the full package, right? They only have the purchase and sale agreement. If there's an addendum with a credit,
right,
it drives them mad.
I look for the whole contract. A lot of times the escrow company doesn't have all the addendums. So like I tell my people, like, look, if the contract says it has a 35, form 35, there has to be a 35R, right? I mean, that's just judgment dictates. And so where is it? And I've seen sale price changes and closing cost changes and all kinds of changes on the 35R that they don't get to the lender, and they don't get, and I've had agents go, well, I don't want you to know, like it's going to kill the deal. Well, it kills the deal if the appraiser thinks he's bringing the appraisal in and the sale price changed on the 35R and we don't know. That's problematic, because once they turn it in, especially on VA, once they turn it in, it's really hard to get them to move. Very hard to get them to move, almost impossible. So yeah, so those are the things. Does anybody have a specific problem or issue that they wanted to run by, since we're here?
I think we have a couple minutes for some questions. I will make a note, since we've got this on the screen, Arnie, but this is Tacoma, and a lot of people ask, well, how do you come up with adjustment factors for square footage? And you talk with an appraiser, how an appraiser appraises. This one, he used $40 as a square foot just to make the difference up between 1478 and 1661. And
so when they do that $40 a square foot in the appraisal, they should say, here's why I'm using $40 a square foot. And it's not a bad idea to look and make sure you use the same per square footage adjustment
all the way across.
So if you use 40 on one and 60 on the other, that's not okay. He's got to be consistent. So they'll say, well, what's the difference in a 1-car garage, like in comp number 6, and a 2-car garage, like in comp number 1? What's the difference? Well, we know, because 2-car garage is no adjustment and 1-car garage 5,000. These should still say bedrooms, bathrooms, square foot. They should comment on all that stuff. So, and a lot of times the appraiser will say, here's the comp, here's my Mama Bear comp. This is the one I gave the most weight to in the appraisal. That's Mama Bear. Okay. And so that's the way I look at it. And, I seem to think right along with these guys, but I can tell you overwhelming majority of the time, you don't have the upper end value range supported. It's like I had an appraisal down in Arizona. Now I'm licensed in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Arizona. And so, in Arizona, I closed a $2 million sale VA this year, where the appraiser called Tidewater like 6 days before closing. And the real estate agent, we got along really great down in Arizona. I had her pull a couple sales for me that were with, we just went out a little further out and a little further back in time because there really weren't comps. And we found two good ones. And I had to put them on a grid, just like what you're seeing on the screen, like I'm an appraiser,
Right.
because you just can't hand them the printout. They won't take it that way. You have to put it on the grid. And so then we did the adjustments and the indicated value subject, and we made the really great effort at it. And at the time, the highest sale, the appraiser had told the listing agent his highest sale was 1.6 million on this $2,075,000 home. His highest upper end value sale was 1.6 million. We gave him one. This supported over 2 million in price. And it was a bit of a stretch, but we gave him two. And I knew that the one was brand new construction. Is it a comp? I don't know. But the one looked pretty good to me. And as I sent it in to VA, I told my assistant, this is what I think is going to happen. He's going to appraise the house at $1,950,000 because that was a little less than the best comp we gave him. And I think that then all the sides will get together and they'll lower the sale price by 35 grand. The buyer will pay 35 grand over the sale price and we'll be done in about 2 weeks. And it was funny. That's exactly what happened, exactly the way it happened. It came in at $1,975,000 and the deal held together. And that doesn't always happen. And when you have, obviously, when you have that low appraisal, if you have a buyer that wants the house bad enough and a seller that is motivated to sell, a lot can happen and the deal still stays together. Kind of like a relationship. I look at it, if you want to be together, you can go through a lot and stay together, right? As a buyer and a seller, that's how it works. It just takes somebody to find the data to kind of get it close so everybody can give a little and make it go. And that's kind of what we're here to do. So
that was good. Any other questions that you got, Shannon, that came into you?
I have a question. When I know you had mentioned that you've done a lot of rebuttals on appraisals. Is there a specific layout? I think I heard you say something about a graph presentation of the
So what you're looking at right here
uh-huh.
on a VA appraisal, this is all they'll take.
Okay.
So I use I have an Excel spreadsheet. I would bang it out into an Excel this is an Excel format, right? So I would do it like that. I would read the appraiser that the appraiser gives and do the adjustments just like he says. This is how I did them. Just like what Rochelle was saying, $40 a foot. So if I was doing a square footage adjustments, I would adjust them at $40 a foot, one way or the other. And you can read his appraisal and see, there's some things like the C4 to C3 where it says 6,000. There's no set like standard. He just did that, and so you have to read his comments about the comps, and that'll tell you a lot of data is in there. Sometimes there's an absorption rate in there, like I was mentioning earlier. And you can say, well, gosh, if there's 9 comps in the last 3 months, according to you, Mr. Appraiser, and you use one that's a year old and did a time adjustment, I'm having a hard time understanding why comp number 4 was used if you had 19 sales in the last year. Yep. And according to your absorption rate, 9 in the last 3 months, the supported value, then why did we use comp number 4? Right? Yeah, especially if comp number 4 is problematic to me. And I wanted to slip in another comp that supported an upper end value range. So it's just arguing in a way with them that speaks more their language. And then if you get them on something like they're using comps outside the market area, and there's other things you can catch them on. And if you're good at arguing those points with them and using their own data against them, then sometimes you get them to move. Sometimes they just dig in and there's just no moving them. But a lot of times I can't move the appraiser, but I can convince my company that this appraisal is defective and I can set it aside and order another appraisal. So when an agent comes to me and they say, hey, I want to have another appraisal, I go, okay, well, let's say we have another appraisal and it comes in at value. Do I just ignore this one that isn't at value? What do we do with this one? And then what do we do? Order a rubber match appraisal that comes in, we'll take the best 2 out of 3. I mean, what do we do? So the way you have to do it is you have to deem this first one defective for some reason. And then if you can get the company to sign off on the fact that they know after closing, if we order a second appraisal and get a higher value, why did you do that?
Right.
We have to have it written up super well so that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, whoever our investor is for the loan, you know, whoever it's sold, whoever's servicing it, they all audit these files. And we have to just be able to document why we have a defective appraisal. Then we order a second appraisal. We gather these comps and we do it, you know, better. And the appraisal comes in and then we have no problems. And that happens at times too. So it's arguing with the appraisal, you're arguing across, and then you're arguing up with the company, like, how do we get this thing done? And it's not like my cost per square. I mean, it's detailed. There's a lot to it. But
Right.
Can you have it go? Yes, you can.
Great question, Candace. So yeah, I think anything I've done with Tidewater, it has something that looks kind of like this as a grid that they have you fill in. So I think you can even download this online as a
We
blank.
have this format in the MLS as well. And then, yeah.
Okay, very good. Anything else from you?
No, this is,
Arnie, that was awesome. You know,
Yes,
just kind of
thank you.
taking it to the next level. I mean, I've covered what to do to prep for the appraiser to come in, and we've had appraisers and appraisal management companies do some really popular YouTube videos for us at
Cool.
Best Church Realty. So this one will add to our educational, and I'm sure that it will be played back quite a few times.
Excellent. Well, if you guys have any questions in the very end, here's my email and phone number. Feel free to shoot it out. And if you want to contact me directly, I'm available just a ridiculous percentage of the time. That's my cell number, my email.
Perfect.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you
Arnie.
guys.
That was
Have a great
awesome.
night.